The trouble is that when they fail that driving test, the time period to get back into the driving test is at this stage difficult and substantial. The best we can do is 2 to 3 weeks from the time you've failed. There is a mandatory 2 weeks, which ends up, the DVSA say it's 10 working days, but that's going to increase as well. The DVSA want to increase that to 28 days.
Hey there! Enjoying this content? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more informative content like this. Now let's get back to the lesson.
I think that one of the biggest problems we have is that we look at this driving test and then all of a sudden we think, well, this is not going to work. And everybody thinks, I've got to get to the driving test, or I've got to get a driving test. The problem with not planning that correctly is that you set yourself up for a fail if you don't actually look at all the consequences of what's going to happen on the day of the driving test. And I had this discussion with somebody earlier this week, and I had a similar discussion previously this week. It's one of the biggest problems we have in the driving industry. And I can understand it, because if I was learning to drive, I'd also want to think I'm ready for the test and I don't need further assistance. And that is a very real situation that occurs when people start thinking about the driving test. They have this minimalistic view around the driving test. They want to keep the fees and the costs as low as possible. But then what happens is, because they're not taking themselves to a point where they are ready to do the driving test before they do the driving test, they actually do not have sufficient experience or sufficient ability to pass the driving test, and they fail the driving test. And very often, and this is the biggest problem, very often this happens literally 2 steps away from the moment you are actually ready. You are literally 4 hours, maybe 4 hours away from being ready for the driving test. And then the student says, no, I don't need any more hours. I'm ready for the driving test. The trouble is that when they fail that driving test, the time period to get back into the driving test is at this stage difficult and substantial. The best we can do is 2 to 3 weeks from the time you've failed. There is a mandatory 2 weeks, which ends up, the DVSA say it's 10 working days, but that's going to increase as well. The DVSA want to increase that to 28 days. What they have said they are going to do now, which is something you must all take note of, they are going to look at how badly you failed. Apparently they're saying they're going to look at how badly you failed, and then if you don't attend a driving test, or you really fail badly, they are going to give you a 28-day lockout, 28 business day lockout. That's nearly 5 weeks. 5 weeks you won't be able to do the test. So it's getting longer, it's getting more difficult. It is things you want to try and do, and you need to really try to plan and think about not the driving test itself. The driving test is not the objective. I can take somebody at 10 or 15 hours, and they can probably between 15 and 20 hours go on the driving test and get the examiner around the course. But there's no chance they're going to pass that test. It's not going to happen. It just can't happen, because you can't get proficient enough with your actual driving ability and duplicating what you have to do as far as the requirements of the examiner are in that shorter time. And that's where the thing comes. So your objective, I think one must shift your objective. You must make your objective a first time pass. Don't make your objective going to the driving test, because our minds are funny things. When we set our mind to a specific task and we are measuring the task by the wrong outcome, chances are we'll get to the outcome without sufficient to actually succeed at the task. We must set our mind to what will be the measure of success for the task. And that's what we should try to do. We should measure our success, not by doing the task, because If you set yourself, your mind, into I am going to do the driving test, well, you're going to do the driving test, but you haven't set your task right from the beginning to I want to pass the first time. And I need to do what's necessary to pass the first time. And if you set your mind to that task, your chances of passing the first time are much greater than the task is not to do the driving test. That's not the task. The task is to pass the driving test the first time you do it. So you need to set your mind to that task. And if you've got a test booked, or you're booking a test, or you're going to be doing a test, every day you need to be thinking to yourself, I am going to set my task to passing the test the first time. What do I have to do to pass this test the first time? Because the cost implications and problems for not passing it the first time are actually quite serious. They're a serious problem. And they become more serious because every time you fail it, it's extra costs. You're getting yourself into a system of failure, and it's very degrading and difficult. And eventually it's difficult to get somebody to a point where if they've maybe failed 2 or 3 tests, it's difficult to get somebody to the point where they actually believe they can pass the test. I will do everything in my power, and we as a company will do everything in our power for you to pass that test the first time. That's the objective is not to get you in the test. The objective is not to get you a driving test. These things are all part of what we have to do to get you to the point where you pass your test the first time. I cannot stress how important that is. So by the end of tonight, I'd like you all to be able to think my objective is to pass the test the first time, not to keep doing this thing forever. Because the first thing that happens, and I see this a lot, people put in the money and they skimp on the number of lessons, and then they are literally 2 to 4 lessons away from being good enough to pass that test the first time. And it doesn't matter what you do. Going back is going to cost you the equivalent of 6 to 8 more hours of lessons, no matter how you do it. And then you might even need more than that now, because you need to go back. You've got to get your confidence back. You've got to revitalize all your driving. You've got to find a driving test again, which could be 3 months away if you don't use our services. All these things are part of this getting to the point where you pass your test. So guys, please think about, my objective is to pass the test the first time. That is the objective. Okay, current delays in the UK driving test availability. You all know what it is at the moment. These things are up to 21 weeks away. 21 weeks, 5 months. Now, if we take 20 weeks and we divide it by 4, that's 5 months from now, which means we're well into the summer. It's a really good time for those of you who have got exams and other things to do to get into, and let us start by at least getting your driving test booked at the appropriate test center and get that done, because the more time we have to work on it, the easier it will be for us to achieve your goals. Now, again, I'm going to talk strategy and planning to you tonight. So I want you all to think strategy and planning. You're not going to go, if your plan is to go to Birmingham, you don't just go down to somewhere and get on a train somewhere and hope it ends up in Birmingham. You have to have an objective. You need to plan it. Okay, I want to go to Birmingham. Where does the train in London leave? Which is the closest station to me? I've got to get to that station, get on that train to get to Birmingham. There are a whole lot of factors you need to consider. Do I need food? What do I need to do? When am I going to be able to do it? What's the best time to travel? What are the costs? All these things come together and you plan it. You're going to drive, you plan it. You have a map. And it's the same with this. Have a map, but the destination here is not the driving test. The destination is to pass the driving test the first time. All the rest of the things, we must look at what we need to get to that first time pass, because that's the true destination, is the pass of the driving test, not the driving test. Don't lose sight of what you have to do and then get into the driving test and you aren't equipped to pass that driving test. You have to be equipped. You have to be ready. You have to be sorted. You have to have all the knowledge there. You need to have trigger points. You need to have done your maneuvers. You need to have done your observations. You need to understand what the IMSM is. You need to know what a roundabout is. You need to know all these things. There's lots of things you need to understand and do properly to be able to pass that driving test. And guys, it's one slip up, one little slip up. It's all you need in that 38 to 40 minute drive. And I can't express it well enough for you. I've sat in cars and I've thought to myself, God, you are so close. Please just don't do this. No, I'm ready. And the people think we're just trying to take money. And then coming back and redoing it becomes an absolute nightmare. So the question is, why should you plan? All right, so I've had a bit of a discussion here. Is there anyone else who's got another thought around why should you plan? Why should you plan? And what should you be focusing on in your planning? Mr. Hassan.
Yeah, I think what you said is to plan in order to pass and succeed in one go and then avoid unnecessary expenses, costs. That's pretty much very simple and straightforward. I mean, for me, I'm kind of not the first time. Like, I have failed my manual driving test almost 16, 17 years ago. And I started my automatic only last year. And it's a silly mistakes, but I regret it. And now I joined with the BDS.
Yeah.
It's kind of, as I said, the availability. I would want to, pass it at one go.
Yeah.
But in terms of the availabilities of the practical test as the issue.
Yeah, but what I would say to you is the important thing here is to plan it. So reverse plan it. So the area you are in, we should match you up with a test, even if the test is 2 months down the road, or it's
mine is exactly 2 months down now.
Okay, so now so what you do now is you have a really good session with your driving instructor, and get your driving instructor to make a plan leading up to that test, and then you lock that test in, and then you say, okay, this is what we have to do, this is where we have to go, and this is how much driving I have to do to be ready for that test.
Can you recommend, or would you be able, BDS provide some sort of the tips, tricks for the practical test, like most on the maneuvering?
Yeah. If you go to the BDS Academy, there's a lot of good information there. All right, guys, so that's really important, okay? Plan this and do it by talking to the client managers. And then the next question is, what resources are you going to work with? Now, your resources are, number one, obviously your driving instructor. Getting your driving instructor online, getting your driving instructor sorted out, and getting a good driving instructor. So that's your first resource. Your second resource is your own ability to interpret the theory and hazard perception you've done into the work. And the way to do that is honestly, in my books, would be to go to BDS Academy and go through the driving mastery course bit by bit. There are areas there you'll see, oh, I know that, I don't need that. Then skip it, go to the next one. You're not under an obligation. But the good thing is you can revise things there. Okay? All right. Current landscape of driving test, 21 weeks. And the DVSA are telling us it's because of COVID pandemic. Honestly, I've had a look at their scheduling and stuff as well. They've got lots of problems with staffing. They have real problems. They're telling us, okay, they're going to recruit 450 additional examiners. I'll be honest with you, I looked at their rates that they want to pay these guys, and I don't know who's going to be working for that, because it's not worth it. I think that's their biggest problem. Okay, so they're working on that at the moment. But I want to say that, guys, the average waiting time is 21 weeks. We can cut that down a lot. We have quite a number of tests that are much less than that in our areas already booked for our clients, where we've managed to find them the tests that they need. Now, obviously, what happens is, because we have a very large database of people, our clients are not always ready. sometimes what happens is they need to attend to some study, or they're having a problem with somebody's baby they have to look after. We had that the other day. The sister had a baby and she had to look after the baby, so she couldn't do the lesson. We had to move her tests down the road, and so on. So we have cancellations that come up all the time. But what we do is we put you on the register, and then we book a test, and we systematically move the test back as we find other cancellations. But if you're not on our register, then obviously we can't really do much about it. But if you guys want to do a driving test at a specific time, please talk to us about it. Okay, so to do your planning properly, you need to gather the relevant information for a successful outcome. You need to determine where you are going to take your driving test. Why is that so important? Who would like to give me an answer for that? Why is it so important to determine where you are going to take your driving test? Why not just come to us and say, I want to test anywhere in the UK that is within 200 miles, I'll drive to the test center. Or I'll get my instructor to take me to the test center. We do that, but you better be a bloody good driver if we do that, if you're going to think you're going to pass that test. But yeah, we've done that in the past. Now, I want to ask you that. Why is the location of your test critical? So the reason the location of the test is important, the real reason it's important, is for you to be able to have a test in an area you can practice. You need to have a test in an area where you can practice. That is really, really important. And the most likely success with a test is if we book your test, for example, in Barnet, and we get your instructor for the Barnet Test Center who knows the driving test routes and who can teach you in the Barnet area. And it might be necessary for you to go to that area, because often when you live closer to London, there aren't test centers in central London itself. It's just not practical. You can't do tests in central London. The traffic is too slow and it's very congested. So you can't teach there either. I have taught there in the past and had to teach from there, where I had to go there and pick people up to go and teach them somewhere else for a driving test. But it's not a very comfortable area for driving tests. Therefore, there aren't any driving tests there. And most of the driving tests are outside London, and then people take the train to an area where they can do a local teach. They can be taught in the area where they are going to do their driving test. So practice driving in the nominated driving test area is very important. Ensuring your instructor leading up to the test, pre-booking the instructor. There is absolutely no better time than right now to pre-book your instructor for the driving test. So the first thing we should do for you to be successful is to get your driving test sorted in the area where you can do the driving test, and then to book up the instructor in that area. And for some of you, that might only be during summer, but a lot of you would like to get that done as soon as possible, and we can do that. But talk to our client managers so we have an opportunity to actually do it for you. Really important. Okay, now I would always start, if somebody comes to me, I really, guys, this is so important. When somebody starts a course, it is important to do an evaluation. So if you're a new one and you've never driven before, you are obviously going to be doing anything from 25 to 35, even 40 hours or more. Depends on how quickly you learn, depends on your dexterity, depends very much, your age has something to do with it as well. The younger you are, the easier you learn, because the easier your brain can get things that need physical activity and learn them. So there are lots of reasons for you to have the right number of lessons leading up to that pass. That is really important. So assessing your readiness beyond standard practice hours, that is really important, that you get that assessment done right at the beginning. Getting that assessment is greatly improves your chance of success, because you're working, you're letting what you're doing is you're actually putting together a plan. That's part of doing the strategic planning. I told you about the DVSA trying to extend it to 28 days. And if you're really going to fail your test badly, the DVSA can put an embargo on how long you actually wait for your next test. That's something new they're working or experimenting with. Developing a personalized study and practice schedules, very important. After each and every session, ask your instructor, okay, what do I need to brush up on? I need to brush up on roundabouts, go back and do the roundabouts on the actual driving mastery course, BDS Academy. If you need to do that, that material is available for you as long as you're with us or as long as you are busy. It's there, it's available, it's good material. And take notes, make notes. Ask your instructor if you can't get what you need from your instructor, please contact us and we'll help you. So higher pass rates are offset by familiarity. Okay, so what this is about is this. We had this whole session on this quite a while back, a couple of weeks back, where somebody had phoned up and said, oh, I'm looking for a driving test where the pass rates are the best place for me to go. My past experience, and I have no limitation to how far I will drive to take somebody to a driving test. I say that, but probably I wouldn't go to Edinburgh. It's a horrible place anyway. But anyway, I didn't say that because I want to slap 5% tax on foreigners. But I have driven to Cambridge from London for a driving test because they actually were critically needed it. We've gone Bishop Stortford. I have done a number of tests. I've even done courses in Bishop Stortford. That's 30 miles from my normal working area, and Wanstead are the tests in my main test centers. But I have helped people. I've had a situation where one of our instructors had a car problem, or we've had a couple of those. And then on the day of the test, I've had to go there. So they had a car to be able to do the test. So we've done that sort of stuff in the past. But it's still best for you to be driving in the area where you're going to have your test. And the familiarity is what helps. So looking at a driving test center and then saying, oh, people are failing because it's got a high fail rate. It's not true. I think you've got more chance of passing a test in a maybe a little bit lower fail rate area by knowing the test routes and knowing that you've trained on those test routes. Then driving test cancellations and reasons. Be careful. Don't get into a situation where you're sitting with a driving test that you don't take. Guys, you need to have it in your diary. You need to drink your vitamin C. Make sure you're not going to get sick, and stay out of the pub the week before your test, because a lot of things can go wrong if you don't look after your health. But because you get to a stage, if you don't cancel your driving test at least 3 working days before the actual driving test, then 3 full working days before the actual driving test, then you lose that test. You lose the fees on that test, which means that if you've got a test on a Friday, the 3 working days on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you have to cancel the test on Monday. They are thinking of increasing that to 10 days as well. So just in case you didn't know that. Maintaining skills during the wait. If you've, for some reason, I would just say avoid the wait. How do you avoid the wait? The wait is from the time you've done a test to do your next test. How do you avoid the wait? So avoid the wait by do it right the first time. Do it right the first time. Avoid the wait by doing it correctly the first time. Just get through it. Plan to pass. Okay, so scheduling consistent driving sessions before you do your test. Make sure you've got enough driving lessons before you do your test. Don't skimp on that. I had a guy last year. This happened to me last year. I said to him, please, you need another 4 hours before you are going to be test ready. And then he went and he agreed to do it and everything. He went home and his girlfriend told him, no, he doesn't need it. He's test ready. She wants to go and buy a dress. But 1 year down the road, he had the opportunity. He failed his test. And I'm 1 year down the road. I wonder how many times his girlfriend's worn the dress she bought with that 4 hours of lessons. And he hasn't got it back together again to do that driving test. He was 4 hours short. I told him, just do the 4 hours. You're nearly there. We just got to do this a little bit extra. Yes, let's do it. Phone me up the next day. No, my girlfriend says I'm ready. I should just do the test. I'll pass it. What does his girlfriend know about this? I can understand it. I guess that's the way life goes. Okay, exploring advanced driving techniques, driving mastery course, conducting mock tests. Very important to do mock tests with your instructor.
If you're enjoying this video and want to see more, head over to www.bds.ac, our interactive video e-learning platform. With BDS Academy, you can learn to drive online from the comfort of your home at your own pace, saving you both time and money. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.bds.ac today. We'll see you there.